so good to see you again, my dear beloved friends. And I'm going to be telling you today the fourth story in my series on miracles of love. As I said, in my lifetime I've had some very miraculous things happen to me, and I feel like I want to share these with you. These aren't only my stories, they're the stories for everybody, and they can give everybody great hope and great love and great wonderment at this amazing world of ours. So I want to light a candle, and I want you to imagine yourself that you're sitting with your grandmother, with your elder, around a campfire, and I'm telling you a story. An ancient custom. Grandmothers telling their children stories. That's my delight now to do that for you. So this story happened when I was 48 years old, and I had taken a year to go around the world and see the world, a wonderful gift to myself. And I had actually wonderful, wonderful things happen to me, and this story is one of the wonderful things, and I really see it as a miracle. So I'm going to tell it to you. What happened was that as I was going around the world, I decided I was going to go to Australia. And I didn't know where to go in Australia, and I didn't know how to know where to go. So I decided I'll just start asking people about Australia, people who have been in Australia, to tell me where they've been. And if something really feels exciting to me, then I'll go to that place that I heard about. So somebody gave me the name of a place called Nimbon. Wow, Nimbon. That just caught my imagination. I didn't know what it was or where it was, but I decided I'll go to Australia, I'll see Nimbon. And I come to Australia, and I land in Sydney on the plane, and I found a hostel I could go to, a youth hostel. And there I started asking people if where they'd been in Australia, if somebody could recommend something to me. So, and I asked them if anybody knew about Nimbon. And somebody had been there once. They said it's an amazing place, you have to go. So I went to the bus station in Sydney, and I asked how far is to Nimbon. They said it's a day and a half ride on a bus to Nimbon from Sydney. So I bought a ticket, I got on the bus, and I'm on my way to Nimbon without knowing why I'm going there or what's going to be there. And I'm sitting on the bus, and I'm thinking to myself, well, this is such a long ride, I hope it's worth it to go to Nimbon. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, well, maybe I'll do a meditation, I'll close my eyes, and I'll ask myself, why am I going to Nimbon? So that's what I did. I sat on the bus, I closed my eyes, and I asked the question. I'm waiting and waiting, my eyes closed, sort of being quiet inside and opening up a space for an answer to come. And all of a sudden, I see a cliff, a black cliff, and I look at the cliff, and on the cliff there were sort of round indentations, sort of like, round indentations like that. And I'm looking at the indentations, and I'm feeling that actually I feel like I should lie down and curl up in one of those indentations. So I'm imagining that I'm doing that, and I'm thinking, well, this is like rebirthing. I wonder if this is a place of rebirthing. And I was quite happy that happened. And then my eyes still closed. All of a sudden, the head of a man came into my imagination, and I saw a man with black curly hair and a black curly beard. And I thought, wow, that looks like an Israeli. I thought maybe there's an Israeli in Nimbon who does rebirthing. A very strange thought that could be, but okay, so that's what happened in my mind. And I ended the meditation, and I got to Nimbon. And Nimbon Rock, it turns out, was a little sort of a village that I could say there was a hippie village. That there were people who lived like hippies there. They dressed like hippies. They smoked marijuana all the time. And, you know, it was like going back in time somewhere. Because this was in 1991, actually. It was 1991. Anyway, I see this this village, and I asked, is there a youth hostel here? And there was a youth hostel, and I went to, and I took a bed in the youth hostel. And I asked people if is anybody going up onto the rock, the cliff, because there was the cliff that I saw. There was the cliff, and I asked people if I could get a ride to the cliff, and I found a ride, and they took me on top of the cliff, this ride, and the top of the cliff, there was a jungle. It doesn't look like jungles from Europe or Brazil or anything. It was an Australian jungle, and there were kangaroos in it too. But it was the jungle was filled with very, very big cobwebs. It was very hard to walk through. So I picked up a big stick, and I took the stick in front of me, and I sort of walked so the stick could take me through the cobwebs. I go through the cobwebs, and I get to the end of the cliff, sort of, where it's seen in my meditation, and I'm looking down, and I'm seeing, is there these indentations that I saw there? And sure enough, there they were. There were indentations on the cliff of a black rock. I was astounded, so I thought, okay, I really have to lie down in one of these indentations and see what happens to me. So I managed to lie down and curl up and put myself into one of those indentations, and I'm waiting to see what amazing thing is going to happen. But nothing happened. Nothing happened. So I thought, okay, so I guess I'm supposed to look for this man, maybe who's supposed to give me a rebirthing. So anyway, so the people took me back down to the youth hostel, and I get to the youth hostel, and I start asking people, is there anybody in Nimbon Rock who does rebirthing? And I asked a lot of people. Finally, somebody thought, yes, there's this woman sort of out in the outback, what they call the outback, who does rebirthing. So I managed to get her name and telephone, and I went to her, and I told her about my meditation, and about seeing that on the rock there is the indentations. So I said, maybe you should do me a rebirthing. She said, no, why don't we look for this this man that you saw in your meditation? I think that's better. And she says, I do think that there's an Israeli, not in Nimbon Rock, but in a few towns further away, who does rebirthing. I remember that there's a man there who I think is an Israeli, and I'll find his telephone number for you. But she found me his telephone number, and I went back to the youth hostel, and very excitedly I called this man up. I said, are you Israeli? He said, yes. Wow, that was just like impossible. But so I asked him if I could have an appointment and come and do a rebirthing with him. So he gave me an appointment, and I managed to find somebody who would take me to that town at the time of the appointment. Also sort of a miracle that somebody just appeared that could take me. And I went to this man, and I tell him the whole story of my meditation and why I'm in Nimbon Rock and everything. And he was also just astounded, and he said, I'll be happy to give you the rebirthing. And because I had done rebirthing before, I lay down on a mat on the floor that was there, and I started breathing very hard, which is what you do, breathing very hard, breathing. And all of a sudden, after I was really full of oxygen, sort of popping, I felt inside of my stomach, I felt a terrible, terrible grief starting to well up. Very, very strong pain and grief, and I even started crying. It was so painful. And I'm trying to think, why am I crying? What's happening? And all of a sudden I felt, God, I'm Mother Earth. I'm feeling Mother Earth, and this is her pain. And then I started feeling the pain of so many of my creatures who are being killed, all of my animals, that I've done millions of years of work in order to have all these animals, and they're being killed now and just disappearing from the earth. They're disappearing from me. And so many trees and plants being cut down, and and my seas, my oceans are being destroyed. It's just too painful, and I was crying and crying. I started yelling. I stood up and I was yelling and screaming just out of pain. And I didn't know how to stop because it was non-ending. There were so many terrible things that were happening. And my human beings, what they're doing to each other, it's just so painful. And I didn't know what was going to happen with all of this pain. And I'm sort of waiting for something to happen. And all of a sudden I felt, oh, I have to lay down again. I laid down, and I started feeling quieter. And then what I saw was that the sky started coming down with enormous calm and clarity and beauty, just coming down, and the sky united with me. And I felt, this is what will save me. The uniting of earth and sky, of spirit and matter, of the male god and the female goddess. And I realized I had gotten a very strong message, very strong, that this whole thing, from the very beginning of finding Nimbon Rock, was in order to give me this message. And this message isn't only mine, it's yours too, it's everybody's. It's to know that we need to bring spirit into the material world that we're living in. Spirit, which is love and is peace and is beauty and is truth. We need to bring that into our world. And look, I was just given this message. This was what will help. This is what we need to do. So I give this to you, and I pray with all of us that we'll be able to heal our earth so that earth won't have to have this terrible pain that I felt for it. I bless you all. Thank you.